Morning when I got out of bed, I couldn't even touch that spot. And yet the coach, get in there, we need you. Yeah, he needed me for fodder, that's what he needed me for. And I got hit on that thing time after time after time. Now here's the punch. I worked a year after high school, then came to Miami. And I'm in the locker room. Now in those days, the sports that were in session, in season, had the same locker room. And so I was there with all the football players. And one day, two players were in there and they were putting foam on their hips. It was sticking out from their hips this far. And I was probably in there getting Band-Aids for my toes, but I asked him, I said, why the foam rubber? He says, well, we got a hip pointer. And I said, what's a hip pointer? And he says, well, somebody hit us on the hip and bruised the bone. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. And I said, well, why are you putting the foam on? He said, well, you can't play football with that. I said, you can't? He says, no. He says, the only reason putting this on, we're going to run through, they're both halfbacks. He said, we're going to run through some plays. This is just in case somebody gets carried away and maybe hits us a little bit. And I'm thinking to myself, I think I'd like to talk to my high school coach. Well, these are things that, Miami was, when I was here, it was fun. I didn't have a scholarship, never did, at Miami. I was given a job. I washed dishes in the dorms, or I passed food out to the people that were sitting there, because in those days we did that. But even so, it didn't make much difference because it was a great institution. Let me tell you about one race that I ran at Miami. It's an important race. It was an important race for me, maybe for Miami too. 1964, one of the first outdoor meets, the first outdoor meet we had here at Miami was probably in early May. We had run in Kentucky and other places, but this was the first one here. And I wanted to run something that was going to be meaningful, not just go out and win the race per se. That was nice too, don't get me wrong. And so I told the coach, I said, well, I'm going to try break 4 minutes in a mile. I hadn't done that yet. I did later in the year, but not yet. And I said, there's a problem. The track is in terrible shape. This was the old cinder track where the business building now is located. And so he said, well, let's go over to the athletic director and be sure that this is going to be fixed up. So we did. And Mr. Schreider said, sure, I'll get the maintenance people on that. And they're supposed to be out there anyway, getting the track ready for tomorrow, put the lane lines down, that sort of thing. So I said, okay, that'd be great. And so later on, the day before now, the meet, I went out to the track about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and nothing had been done. Nothing. And I thought to myself, there's no way I can run fast on this track, try to break 4 minutes, unless this track's in better shape. And so I looked under the stadium and I found a wheelbarrow and a rake and a shovel, and I started taking big cinders. Some of you may have run on cinders, I don't know, but maybe most of you probably not. And some of these clunkers were this big, and they come up in the winter, and I'm a farm boy, just like rocks come up in your field, and you have to get them off. Well, cinders do the same thing. And so I spent 2 hours before about 3 freshmen came out, and we worked another 2 hours. I took 7 loads of cinders off the first lane. I wasn't going to worry about the 2nd through 8. I wasn't going to do all that work. So I went back home, and I had my afternoon workout to do, so I went out, and I was a little tight in the shoulders from doing this wheelbarrow and all that kind of stuff, but not too bad. Next morning, I got up and do my morning workout before the meet. Still feel a little stiff, but loosened up okay. Finally, it came time for the meet. I warmed up over in the freshman area, away from the track, underneath the trees. Rick Cunningham was one of the young men, and he comes here quite often, I understand. Lives in California, comes back. And I went over to Rick, and I said, Rick, actually I had done this the night before, went to his dormitory, and I said, Rick, would you lead me through the first 800 meters? And I explained to him what I wanted to do, and he agreed to do that. So they called us over. Of course, the meet was going on. The mile was ready now, and went to the line. The gun went off, and off we went. It wasn't going to be any competition from the other team. Rick was better than they were. I was a little bit better than they were, I guess. He set the tempo for the first 800 meters and ran 1:58, which is exactly what I wanted. Came through the 3 quarters at 3 minutes flat. And of course, Rick had pulled off. He was still in the race, but the 3rd lap I took over. I'm coming around, and I'm feeling pretty good. 200 meters to go now. Going into my sprint, and my shoulders tie up. You've all had something like that happen to you. And when something happens in one part of your body, the rest of your body just doesn't want to cooperate. And I was driving as hard as I could. We had the biggest crowd because somebody had got word that I was going to try this. The newspapers, the student paper got a hold of it. The Dayton paper had it in their sports page. And we had the biggest crowd ever for a dual meet. And they were cheering. I could usually I shut those things out, but I could hear them as I'm coming down the straightaway. I finished. I walked into the infield, waiting on the announcement. Finally, it came. 3rd place, 2nd place, Rick Cunningham. In 1st place, with the new Miami record, new field record, of course, 4 minutes, and I just about died. 4 minutes and 7/10 of a second. I must tell you, though, maybe I was a little upset about the wheelbarrow and the shovel and the rake. I'm sure it doesn't happen anymore, especially on this track. You don't need that. And we've progressed a long way. Now, I look at facilities here, and I think to myself, my land, how much better can they be any place? You're very fortunate that you have these facilities, and of course, you're fortunate to have the great coaches that you do, the very good coaches. And I must say, because I've met Brad before, a very nice athletic director, I think, is doing a tremendous job. I'm proud to be a Miamian. I come back 2 or 3 times a year. I'm proud to tell people I went to Miami. You will be too. You know, there's one thing about being an athlete, and I've had this happen to me time after time. I want you to understand that, like in athletics, you're not always going to win in the game of life. There's going to be sometimes you lose. I've lost in partnerships and other things, business things. Things just didn't go right. But I'll tell you what you will be able to do, because I was able to do it and you will too. And that is to set it aside, because you haven't won all the time. You didn't go out of this university with a perfect record. But that didn't bother you, because you've been trained to overcome that and get back in the game the next time. You're going to do that in life too. And you're going to be better off than most people who didn't play athletics. You're going to be able to do anything that you want to do, and many of you are going to do a lot of different things before you retire. And you're going to give everything you have, because that's what you did here. And the other thing you'll do is prepare yourself for that job. And when it comes right down to it, you look back on your athletic career and you'll say, I did it then, I prepared well, maybe I didn't win every time, but I was in the game. And you'll be able to do that in every part of your life. Well, again, congratulations to each and every one of you. It's a privilege for me to be here to talk to you. Best of luck to all.